So, ladies and gentlemen, joining us on her 58th birthday, nearly 10 years since she first went into national politics, Germany's Minister of Defense, Dr. Ursula von der Leyen. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
I'm so glad you chose to spend it with us. It's very good of you. So let's cut to the chase here, because you've become Minister of Defense in Germany at a time when it's the epicenter of the world right now. I mean, it's the moral center of this leader, really, of this gigantic refugee crisis. And now Putin has upped the ante. He's gone into Syria. What do you want NATO to do? I mean, here you are, Minister of Defense. You're seeing all of this unbelievable tension.
Well, what the refugee crisis is concerned, there are many different places where I am involved as a defense minister. It starts with the domestic tasks. The troops are helping, the armed forces are helping all over the place, wherever you can think of, for example, to create shelter. We have 10,000 refugees a day at the moment in Germany, every single day, 10,000 new refugees coming to the country, so they have to be taken care for. The transport, the support, feeding them, giving them shelter, as I said. So these are chores at home. But of course, if you look at the crises of the world, be it in the Mediterranean Sea, where we are saving refugees from drowning, fighting smugglers and trafficking, or if you look to Syria, Iraq, where the Bundeswehr, the German armed troops at the moment are supporting the Peshmerga, the Kurds, who actually are not only fighting IS, but also giving shelter and protecting the Yazidis. They have 1.5 million refugees in Kurdistan, and we are giving them arms, and we are training and equipping them so that they can fight ISIS. So lots of tasks to do at the moment, being all over the place.
It's unbelievable. I mean, the German military has always been, you know, something. It's more of a pacifist country, obviously, Germany, since the dark history, and there hasn't been a desire to engage. Now that you're Minister of Defense, you have a much, you actually advocate greater engagement. And now you're being tested in that philosophy, in a sense. So how do you see the engagement of Germany in all of these problems?
Well, you know, when I started, I said indifference is not an option. That was theory. It was 2 years ago. And that was the beginning of 2014, and it started immediately. I was tested immediately. The Ukraine crisis started. 4 or 5 months later, we had the crisis in Iraq, IS starting to slaughter the Yazidis. We had Ebola. The army had to help there too. We had the refugee crisis right now. So ongoing, all of a sudden, you are being tested what it means to take over responsibility. And what I think is, well, Germany is by now a mature country. And it's a country with a lot of political and economic power, which is nice to have, but then you cannot shy away from the responsibility in places where it's hard and tough and where the solutions are not nice at all. And it was something Germany had to learn, because out of our horrible history, out of World War II, we always had the attitude never ever getting involved anymore in any military conflicts. But this is, you know, you cannot do that if you're a strong country. You really have to stand up, specifically if people are being slaughtered and if you want to protect them.
But if you're going to engage more, then the German military has to be more prepared than it has been, because the military has not really been a modernized military. And that's one of the things you've been charged to do, correct?
That's true. After the fall of the wall, the last 25 years, we have been kind of a shrinking army, because everybody thought in Germany we're surrounded by friends, so who needs an army? And that changes something in an organization if you have a budget that is getting smaller and smaller and you have to cut budget. You think into deficits. And now all of a sudden things turned 180 degrees, and now I focus on modernizing the Bundeswehr, because if we want to take over responsibility, we need human resources, we need a personnel that is dedicated, that is motivated, and that is qualified. We need the best. And we are not a compulsory army anymore. It's a voluntary army. We compete with the whole economic sector who were trying to get those talented young people.
Yeah, it hasn't been very cool to join the army in Germany.
Absolutely, absolutely. And therefore, the first thing I started was that I said, when those young people, those soldiers, men and women, are willing to give the best for the country, are willing to stand up for democracy, for freedom, for our values, then we have to treat them at least as good as anybody else in the country. So I started with the reconciliation of army, jobs, and family, for example. Or I started to introduce a modern work right, which is like you have limited time you work during the week, which was not installed before. We modernize, for example, the IT infrastructure. We modernize the system, how we pay, because I think it's a matter of honoring what those young people are doing for our country and how they stand up. They're not getting paid a lot compared to the economic sector, but we try to give them something back. And the second part is that we try to modernize the army. We're talking about cyber threats now. We are talking about all these different things that we have to deal with. If you want to have an army that is able to really protect, and I know that there's never only the military solution, but sometimes you need the military just to open the window for reconciliation in a conflict, then you need armored forces that are modern and flexible and are effective.
So as you're thinking about this threat that Putin has declared, really, by going into Syria, where do you think he's going with what he's trying to do? And do you now actually regret not helping the rebels in Ukraine by sending them arms? Do you think it was a mistake that Germany did choose not to arm the rebels in Ukraine?
No, I think...
Does he feel a vacuum of power that he's not being pushed back in Ukraine?
In the Ukraine, Putin tried to... Well, he always said he has nothing to do with the Ukraine. It's the separatists. And of course, we know that he started a hybrid warfare in the Ukraine. He did the utmost to destabilize the Ukraine and to hurt the Ukraine. And if it needed a proof that he is directing that conflict in the Ukraine, look at the last 2 weeks where he kind of switched off the conflict in the Ukraine because he was concentrating on Syria now. But when he started to exert power and started to lead a hybrid warfare in the eastern Ukraine, we decided not to answer with the same means because it would have been a horrible clash of military forces with an enormous bloodshed in the Ukraine with an open end. What we did is answer, first of all, by unity of the Western world. That if there's one thing he achieved, it's the unity of the Western world. And we tried to answer with modern means. That is, if somebody does what he did, he cannot go on with business as usual. He's dependent of the global economy. So we answered with sanction. And that combined with the dropping oil price hurt Russia at its most vulnerable place, which is an economy that is not modernized, because for a modern economy, you have to open up, you have to exchange people, you have to have strangers coming in. These are new thoughts. You might have to accept the rule of law. You have to accept there is an opposition, all things he did not want to. Mm-hmm. And the fact is you have to have strategic patience for that. But the effect is now that we see that the Russian economy is going down the drain. And somehow you have to pay your army. I know it takes time, but I think it is a better answer than try to have those clashes of military forces of both sides in the Ukraine. What he does now in Syria is try to position himself as strong as possible and to decide in what kind or at what kind of table he's going to sit down to negotiate how to go forward in Syria. This is very difficult because in Iraq and Syria you have a situation where there are many different regional powers. If you start with Russia, look to Turkey, look to Iran, look to Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Lebanon, the United States, Europe, all different actors having interests in that region, the one and single common interest we share is to fight the Islamic State. And therefore, as tough as it is, we have to sit down and we have to find a minimal consensus whom to fight and whom to protect. We are not at that point right now, but this is where we have to go to.
Do you feel that America has overlearned the lessons of the Iraq War? That we went from rushing into Iraq and causing havoc to standing back and standing back and standing back and creating a power vacuum now, which Putin has rushed into?
Well, what I do appreciate is that this time the United States created the Alliance Against Terror, so they analyzed together with the other partners the situation, and they went in the conflict with the others and did not just rush forward and draw us behind them. And just to be honest, this is a conflict that will last for a long time. It's not an easy turnaround. There is not the one and only solution, because you will not solve the problem of the Islamic State without the engagement of the Muslim Arab world around, because I saw just an hour ago the Jordan Queen. I talked to the Jordan King and he told me, you know, this is our fight. This is not your fight of the West. It's our fight. He's so right. You help us, but it's our fight. We have to define the real Islam. And he's right. Without the regional Muslim Arab world, without a consensus how to fight the Islamic State, we will not be on the long term successful and sustainable with peace in that area.
And yet, of course, Europe is getting the backlash of all of the refugees pouring out. And I think everyone was really fascinated by Germany's response to the refugees, by Chancellor Merkel really proving to be such a sort of moral force, to be such a welcoming force for the refugees. I mean, I was astonished even to see that Albert Speer's daughter has 2 refugees living in her house. What has it been like, this great moral shift, in a sense, that's happened in Germany, this whole change in your national character? Clearly, living there as a German, you know, you've grown up there and you've been part of it, but to the other part, you know, to the rest of us, to see this change was absolutely remarkable.
Well, it's a matter whether you really live up to your values. And I think the Chancellor did great when she decided, well, we're going to have a positive attitude towards these refugees. That's what she basically said. There are many, many people coming, but one of our core values, specifically with our history, the German history, is to protect the human rights of every individual, and really to stand up for human dignity. And it's a matter of dignity, whether you take serious when somebody is fleeing from terror and civil war and a war region, whether you give him or her shelter or not. And even if there are thousands and thousands and thousands coming, if you stand up to your values, you really have to open the door for those. This is not easy, because there are really a lot of refugees coming. During the month of September, we had 270,000 refugees coming to Germany.
And now you have a backlash, of course, and it's not so easy now for China.
It's not so easy because at the beginning there is a lot of euphoria. Mm-hmm. And people are overwhelmed by the will to help. But of course, over the long term, it's tough. There's a lot of integration. You have to share housing, you have to share schools, you have to deal with all these different types of people coming, you have to invest a lot of money. But I'm absolutely convinced that if we do it right, it will be of great benefit, not only for the refugees, but also for Germany. And there's one thing which is different in this situation in Germany. First of all, we have a solid economic basis, so we are capable to share and to invest. The second part is even more important. We have at this time no debate in Germany how to integrate. 20 years ago, it was totally different. There were fierce debates over whether you could send them to school or keep them away from work, whether you should allow refugees to work or not, asylum seekers. This is over. Be it the left wing party or the right wing party, there is a common sense that if you want to be successful in integration, give immediately access to schooling, immediately access to the language. You have to learn the language. Give immediately access to work. This is the best thing you can do to integrate them because it's empowerment you give to people. Be strict on the rules and the values. We can only live together if we, all of us, respect the law and respect the rules and the values. And this is something which we learned out of the lessons of the past, 60 years. We did many, many mistakes what integration is concerned. And this is a solid basis to go forward. I know we have to be very positive about it because many people fear that we will not make it, but I'm convinced we can make it.
Well, I mean, here we are at Women in the World. I mean, do you think that more women in power would have led to less global dysfunction than we have now? I mean, seriously. I mean, we can't help but feel that all this toxic testosterone has been created the horrors that we're living in. And here you are, Minister of Defense. Chancellor Merkel has been extraordinary leader of her country. What is your view?
Well, to be honest, they are phenomenal women and they are difficult women. They are phenomenal men and they are difficult men. I think it's a question of the mixture. Germany is a typical country where you had over, centuries, what we said, specifically in the economic world, old white men having the power and no access at all for women what power is concerned. There still is a strong glass ceiling. So what we want is a mixture. We want diversity. And women are not better than men, but they are different. They have a different view on things. So if a society is smart, they use the diversity of looks into the risks or the opportunities, and the mixture makes you strong. The mixture makes you resilient and risk-taking and proactive and modern. Well, that's why I think you need both.
You need both, but you've done a great deal in changing the whole environment for working women in Germany. I only just recently learned, reading about you, this horrible phrase, the raven mother, which is what is often said about women in Germany, the sort of the stigma that attaches to women who have families and go out to work. They're called raven mothers. And you came in as Minister of Family, then Minister of Labour, and you did a tremendous amount to change that whole attitude to women who work, making changes in laws. I mean, maybe you'd just like to tell a little bit about some of those reforms that you did, because it's made an enormous difference to allowing women to have families and work.
Yes, there was, and partly still is, what things changed. There was a long tradition in Germany that if you have a good education, you have access to any job, if you're a woman or a man, except for the moment when you're having a child. This is different for a woman. If you have a child, you better stay at home. That was tradition in Germany. And if you go to work, if you're a working mom, well, this could not be good for your child. This was the bad conscience poured over these poor women. I started, of course, in Germany. We had the first 3 children. I was kind of stuck in a situation full of bad conscience, feeling to be a bad mom at home and a bad medical doctor at the hospital because I couldn't get things together.
We should just say here that Dr. von der Leyen was a doctor, medical doctor, an academic, went with your husband to Stanford when he was a professor.
Exactly, and then we went to Stanford with 3 children, and there we realized that Stanford had the attitude, you're both medical doctors, you have 3 children, how wonderful, how can we help you to reconcile work and family? And this was an eye-opener, because then you realize when you have a supportive environment, you can just grow and do things you never dreamt of. When we came back to Germany, we had 5 children, and I was determined.
So this is the elephant in the room here, 7 children. We're going to get to this now.
And I was decided never, ever to let anybody give me a bad conscience anymore. And I took this attitude into politics. So great. I took that attitude into politics, and then I introduced a parental leave for fathers and mothers, which is like in the first year, you have 12 months at a couple, you can take paternal leave, and you're being paid for. What you lose in your income, you get 67% via the state. The good part in it was that we said 2 months are reserved for the father, take it or leave it. And that changed something, because these young fathers went to their employers and said, I have 2 months of leave I can take, and I am being paid, so I want to take my father's month. And all of a sudden you had all these young fathers caring for the babies, the newborns, while the mother went back to work.
I think that's brilliant, the serial idea of giving women a year and then having the men take 2 months when they come back.
He can even take more if he wants
amazing.
to, being
It's
paid.
But
the smart part was those 2 months only reserved for the father were take it or leave it. You cannot switch them to the mother. And now we have a whole young generation of young fathers who realized, I'm a good father. I cannot be replaced. I do not want to be a second-hand mother. I am a perfect first-class father. And yes. and what I want to show is, on both sides, the mothers and the fathers realize that life is nice with a newborn and tough too, and life is nice and tough too at work. But you do not have all this blaming game between mothers and fathers when he is at work and she is at home with all the complications you have. And what I want to say is, the second part of what I introduced is the right for a child from the first year on to have childcare. Because after that first year, if you want to go back to work, you need childcare. Otherwise, it doesn't work. What I think is necessary is to get these modern men as your allies if you fight for women's rights. And what I remember is when I started with these laws, I tried to introduce the law, there was an enormous shitstorm from, from these middle-aged career men, specifically in politics. They tried just to dump me immediately. And then Wolfgang Schäuble, our finance minister, I guess you know him. Wolfgang Schäuble kind of sat there in his wheelchair and said to those men, wait a moment. When I look at my daughter, she is a lawyer. She wants to have children. How should that go in our state if we continue like that? And all of a sudden I realized how much power you get if you have one strong man at your side to convince those other men that they have to change. So you need the allies.
You certainly do. Now, obviously, you have a very strong, wonderful partner in your husband, because I still get back to feeling, I don't care how much support and help you have, to have 7 children and at the same time be First Minister of Labour, Family Labour, and now Minister of Defence. How did you two work it out?
Well, to be honest, the first 15 years of our marriage, he made a career. And my career did shrink over and over. And at the very end, I was a part-time working mom with 7 children, and he was a professor for medicine. The typical story. And then I was appointed Minister for Family Affairs, and all of a sudden, I had no time anymore. So he had to take over his duties as a father. And I was not able to write all these little papers to tell him what he had to do the next day with the children anymore, because I had no time. Looking back, he still says, this was the best thing that could have happened to him, but because all of a sudden he realized his position as a father, how indispensable he is. And to be honest, I really had to learn a lot. I had just to learn to let go as a mom too, an over-controlling mom. But it was a good experience. So it's 15 years later now. And my experience was, that the father has its own role and the mother has her own role. And you do a good job if you give both of them the freedom to see both, to have the job and to have the family chores. But don't try to turn him into a second-hand mom. He is a first-class father, but you have to let him do his thing.
Thank you so much. Dr. von Leyen, you're an inspiration. I think, look at this. Thank you. I'm sorry, but if ever there was an advertisement for more brilliant women like this running the world, I'm so glad she is, right? Thank you. Thank you so much. I was so glad.